Blood never quite washes out of white marble. 12 women scrubbed this exact hallway before Cora. 12 women dropped their bleach, heard the muffled screams from the basement, and ran. Cora just wrung out her mop. Minimum wage was minimum wage, and terror didn't pay the heating bill. Bleach burns. It strips the top layer of skin right off your fingertips if you aren't careful, leaving the pads raw and shiny. Cora wasn't careful anymore. She dipped her greying sponge into the yellow plastic bucket, letting the chemical sting settle into the familiar cracks of her knuckles. Her knees popped loudly against the imported Italian tile as she shifted her weight. It was Tuesday. Tuesdays were for the East Wing. 3 days ago, a girl named Sarah had been on East Wing duty. Sarah had lasted exactly 4 hours. She'd made the mistake of looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows towards the gravel driveway just as a black SUV pulled up. Cora hadn't seen what Sarah saw, but she had heard the girl's frantic, hyperventilating gasps in the laundry room. Before Sarah tore off her apron, abandoned her supplies, and sprinted down the service road in her slip-resistant shoes. Sarah was number 12. Cora was number 13. She scrubbed a stubborn, rusty smudge near the baseboard. The house was too quiet. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a submarine deep underwater. The architecture was entirely modern. Sharp angles, sterile white walls, glass partitions. It felt less like a home and more like a museum waiting for an exhibit. A heavy thud vibrated through the floorboards. Cora didn't flinch. She paused her scrubbing, breathed in the harsh fumes of the ammonia, and exhaled slowly. Her heart gave a dull, obligatory thump against her ribs. Fear was a luxury for people who had a safety net. Cora had a past-due notice from her landlord shoved in the pocket of her jeans, rubbing against her thigh with every movement. She had $36 in her checking account. Footsteps approached. They were slow, deliberate, the sharp click of expensive leather heels on marble. Leon Hayes turned the corner. He didn't look like the monsters on the evening news. He was tall, his posture rigidly straight, with sharp cheekbones and thick, jet-black hair that fell slightly over his forehead. His Korean heritage was obvious in the shape of his eyes and the structure of his jaw, though the name on the property deed sounded like a Midwestern banker. The tailored charcoal suit he wore probably cost more than Cora would make in 3 years. He stopped a few feet away from her. Cora kept her eyes on the floor. She wrung out her sponge. The dirty water slapped the surface of the bucket. The air shifted when he was near. It grew colder. He brought smells with him: expensive vetiver cologne, stale cigarette smoke, and a metallic sweet tang that Cora knew intimately but refused to name. Iron, copper, blood. "You're in the way," he said. His voice was low, carrying a slight rasp, stripped of any recognizable accent. Cora rocked back on her heels. She wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, careful not to get chemicals on her dark brown skin. Her hair was pulled into a tight, utilitarian bun at the nape of her neck, but the humidity of the bucket had caused tight coils to spring loose around her ears. She looked up, not at his face, but at his shoes. Black Oxfords, spotless, except for a dark, wet speck near the sole. "I have 2 feet left to clean, sir," Cora said. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "If you step over the bucket, you won't track anything into the study." Silence stretched. It was thick enough to choke on. She could feel him staring at her. She knew what he saw: a black woman in her late 20s, wearing an ill-fitting navy blue uniform, kneeling in dirty water. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't shrinking away. She wasn't brave either. She was just deeply, profoundly tired. Her lower back ached with a dull throb that had been her constant companion for 6 years. Leon didn't step over the bucket. He stepped directly onto the wet tile she had just dried, leaving a faint, muddy footprint. Cora stared at the footprint. A muscle feathered in her jaw. "You missed a spot," he said softly, and walked past her. Cora closed her eyes. She inhaled the bleach again, letting it sear the back of her throat to keep from screaming. She didn't curse him out. She didn't throw the sponge at his head. She simply grabbed her rag, leaned forward, and wiped away the smudge of dirt he had left behind. It took her another hour to finish the hallway. By the time she stood up, her joints were screaming. She emptied the bucket down the utility sink in the back room, watching the grey, sudsy water swirl down the drain. She was supposed to clean his office next. 12 women had found excuses to skip the office. They would claim they felt sick, or they would simply leave. The office was where the meetings happened. The office was where the men in dark coats went in, and sometimes didn't come out. Cora pushed her cleaning cart down the hall. The wheels squeaked. The sound was deafening in the empty house. She stopped in front of the heavy oak doors. She raised her knuckles and knocked twice. "Come in." She pushed the door open. The office was dim, lit only by a brass desk lamp with a green glass shade. Leon was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His forearms were corded with muscle and crisscrossed with faded, thin white scars. He was holding a glass of amber liquid. Ice clinked against the crystal as he swirled it. "Garbage and dusting, sir," Cora said to the floor. "Do it." She moved methodically. She emptied the wastebasket, crumpled papers, a shattered phone screen, a bloody handkerchief. She didn't pause at the handkerchief. She tied the plastic bag into a tight knot and tossed it onto her cart. She grabbed her microfiber cloth and a can of polish. She moved to the bookshelves lining the far wall. "What is your name?" The question came out of nowhere. Cora's hand stopped mid-wipe. She looked over her shoulder. Leon was watching her. His eyes were completely dark, devoid of the warmth or casual curiosity people usually had when asking a name. He was observing her the way a mechanic observes a strange engine noise. "Cora," she said. "Cora," he repeated. He tasted the syllables. "The agency said they sent 13 women this month. You are the 13th. "Yes, sir. Do you know why the other 12 left?" Cora turned back to the bookshelf. She sprayed polish onto the cloth. The sharp scent of artificial lemon cut through the heavy smell of liquor and leather in the room. "I imagine they found better opportunities," Cora said evenly. Leon let out a sound. It wasn't a laugh. It was a sharp, exhaled breath. "They ran, Cora. They heard things, they saw things, and they ran. One of them left her shoes in the driveway." "Shoes are expensive," Cora muttered, rubbing a smudge off a leather-bound book. "Shame to waste them." "Why haven't you run?" Cora stopped. The cloth hung limp in her hand. Her chest tightened. A very primal, very loud instinct in her brain was screaming at her to drop the polish and bolt. The man behind her was dangerous. The air around him practically vibrated with violence. She could feel it prickling the hairs on the back of her neck. She turned around. She looked at him directly for the first time. His face was striking, but hard. There was a faint bruise on his left cheekbone, barely visible in the dim light. "Because my rent is $1,600 a month," Cora said. Her voice trembled just slightly, betraying the exhaustion beneath her apathy. "My electric bill is 2 months past due. Groceries cost double what they did last year. And this job pays $30 an hour, under the table, no questions asked. Leon stared at her. I don't care what you do in the basement, Mr. Hayes, Cora continued, her throat dry. I don't care who comes in and out of this house. I don't care about the stains on the floor. I just need to get paid on Friday. She waited for him to get angry. She waited for him to pull a weapon, or fire her, or worse. Instead, Leon took a slow sip of his drink. He swallowed, the ice clinking loudly in the quiet room. Finish the dusting, he said softly. Cora turned back to the shelf. Her hands were shaking now. She squeezed the cloth tighter, willing the tremor to stop. She had shown her hand. She had shown him how desperate she was. Desperation was a weakness men like him usually exploited. But as she wiped down the mahogany wood, she didn't feel him looming. She just heard the scratch of his pen on paper, steady and rhythmic. By Thursday, the house felt different. Not safer exactly, but the edges of the tension had shifted. Cora worked the late shift. It paid an extra $5 an hour. The house was cavernous at night, the massive windows turning into black mirrors that reflected the sterile white walls. It was 2 a.m. Cora was in the industrial kitchen. The countertops were stainless steel, cold and unforgiving. She was scrubbing the stovetop, trying to get off a layer of grease left behind by whoever cooked for Leon's crew. She was bone-tired, the kind of tired that settles in the marrow and makes your teeth ache. Her uniform felt heavy against her skin. She paused, leaning her hip against the counter, and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. A floorboard creaked. Cora dropped her hands. Leon was standing in the doorway. He was wearing dark sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt. Without the tailored suits and the gelled hair, he looked younger, less like a cartel boss and more like a man who couldn't sleep. But the stillness was the same, the predatory quiet. He didn't acknowledge her. He walked to the massive double-door refrigerator, opened it, and grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. Cora picked up her sponge and went back to scrubbing. Keep your head down. Do the work. He closed the fridge with a soft thud. He didn't leave. Cora could feel him leaning against the kitchen island behind her. The cold fizz of his water bottle opening broke the silence. You missed a spot, he said. Cora stiffened. It was the same thing he'd said in the hallway. She looked down at the stovetop. It was gleaming. Where? She asked, her voice raspy from disuse. I don't know. You just seem like the type who hates missing things. It was a taunt, a quiet, probing poke to see what she would do. Cora squeezed the sponge. Greasy water dripped onto the steel. She was too tired for games. She was too tired for mafia mind tricks. She turned around and leaned against the stove, crossing her arms over her chest. The kitchen lights were harsh, washing out the color in the room, but making the dark circles under her eyes starkly visible. Can I help you with something, Mr. Hayes? Or are you just going to stand there and critique my cleaning? The words were out before she could filter them. Panic spiked in her chest. Her stomach dropped. She had just mouthed off to a man who routinely had blood on his shoes. Leon didn't blink. He took a sip of his water. You're insolent. I'm tired, Cora corrected. Most people who are tired of living just jump off a bridge. They don't usually insult the man who employs them. If you fire me, I'll be homeless by Tuesday. I don't have the energy to pretend to be terrified of you. She sighed, dropping her arms. You want me to cower? Fine, I'll cower, but I'm still charging you for the hour. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift happened in Leon's face. The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was the ghost of one, dead before it fully formed. He set the water bottle down on the marble island. He took 2 steps toward her. Cora's breath hitched. Her bravado crumbled instantly. Up close, he was massive. The physical reality of him, the breadth of his shoulders, the quiet, coiled strength in his arms, was suffocating. He smelled like soap and warm skin. He stopped less than a foot away. Cora had to tilt her head back to look at him. She hated that her pulse was fluttering visibly at the base of her throat. She hated that her body knew how dangerous he was, even when her mouth forgot. Leon raised a hand. Cora flinched. She couldn't help it. She squeezed her eyes shut and braced for the impact, bracing for the violence she had spent her life trying to dodge. A rough, calloused thumb brushed against her cheekbone. Cora's eyes snapped open. Leon was looking at his thumb. There was a smear of black grease on it. He wiped it off on his thumb with his index finger. "You had grease on your face," he murmured. His voice was so quiet it felt like an intrusion. The heat from his hand lingered on her cold skin. Cora stood frozen, her sponge dripping onto the floor. "You're shaking," he noted, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You startled me," she whispered. "You said you weren't terrified of me." "I said I didn't have the energy to pretend. The real thing doesn't take any effort." Leon stared at her for a long time. The harsh kitchen lights cast deep shadows under his cheekbones. There was a strange contradiction in him. He was a man who lived in brutality, yet his touch had been startlingly precise. Careful. "Go home, Cora," he said finally. He turned away, picking up his water bottle. "My shift isn't over for another hour. I'm paying you for the full night. Go home." He walked out of the kitchen. His footsteps faded down the long, empty hallway, leaving Cora standing alone in the glaring light. She reached up and touched her cheek. The skin was burning. She looked down at the sponge in her hand, then at the gleaming stovetop. Her hands were shaking violently now, the adrenaline finally crashing through her system. She didn't know what was worse, the fact that he was a monster, or the fact that for a single, stupid second, she hadn't wanted him to pull his hand away. Cora stripped off her rubber gloves, threw them in the sink, and grabbed her bag. She walked out the back door into the freezing night air. As she walked down the long, dark driveway toward the bus stop, she didn't look back at the house. She knew he was probably watching from one of the massive windows. 12 women had run from this house. Cora zipped her thin jacket up to her chin, shivering in the wind. She hadn't run. She had been dismissed. And tomorrow, despite the hammering in her chest and the warning bells screaming in her head, she knew exactly what she was going to do. She was going to come back. Rain sounds different when it hits bulletproof glass. It doesn't patter. It thuds. Heavy, dull, and relentless. Cora was in the laundry room on the ground floor, folding thick Egyptian cotton towels. The heat from the industrial dryer was stifling, clinging to her skin and making the collar of her uniform itch. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Friday. Payday. An envelope with $1,200 in crisp, untraceable bills was currently sitting in the bottom of her tote bag. She should have left an hour ago, but the rain was torrential, washing out the gravel driveway into a river of mud. She was waiting for it to break. The heavy oak door at the end of the hall slammed open. The sound was sharp enough to rattle the detergent bottles on the metal shelving. Cora froze, a white hand towel suspended between her hands. Usually the men who worked for Leon were quiet. They moved like shadows, slipping in and out of the side entrances. They didn't slam doors. A heavy, dragging footstep echoed on the marble. Then another. Cora set the towel down. Her throat tightened. The smart thing, the thing the other 12 women would have done, was to lock the laundry room door, turn off the light, and wait. But Cora's tote bag was in the staff locker down the hall. Her rent money was in that bag. She stepped out of the laundry room. The hallway was dimly lit by sconces, casting long, warped shadows across the floor. A man was leaning heavily against the wall about 20 feet away. He was breathing in wet, ragged hitches. It was Leon. He had lost his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was plastered to his torso, soaked dark by the rain, but the left side wasn't just wet. It was black in the dim light, glistening. He was gripping his side with one hand, his knuckles white with strain. With every step, his polished Oxford shoe squeaked, leaving a thick, dark smear on the white marble. Cora stared. The metallic smell hit her a second later, cutting through the comforting scent of fresh laundry detergent. Iron, copper, raw meat. He looked up. His face was grey. The sharp, terrifying angles of his jaw were slack. His black hair matted to his forehead. He saw her standing there, in her cheap navy uniform, clutching a bottle of fabric softener she didn't realize she had picked up. "Get out," he rasped. He didn't sound angry. He sounded hollowed out. Cora didn't move. Her heart was beating so fast it blurred into a continuous vibration against her ribs. She looked at the blood dripping from his fingers, pooling on the grout lines of the Italian tile. He took another step, swayed violently, and his knee buckled. He hit the floor hard. The thud made Cora's teeth ache. She should walk away. This was cartel business. This was how men like him died. Alone, in empty, expensive houses, bleeding out on floors they paid other people to clean. If he died, she wouldn't have a job, but she wouldn't have to look over her shoulder anymore either. Leon didn't try to get up. He just lay there, his head resting against the baseboard, his chest heaving irregularly. His eyes slid shut. "Stupid," Cora whispered to herself. The word tasted like ash. She dropped the fabric softener. It bounced on the floor, the plastic cracking. She ran down the hall, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking over the wet marble, and dropped to her knees beside him. Up close, the smell of blood was overwhelming. It was sticky and hot. "Mr. Hayes," Cora said, her voice sharp. She reached out, her hands hovering over his chest, terrified to touch him. "Leon." His eyes cracked open. The irises were entirely black, dilated with pain and shock. He looked at her like he couldn't quite figure out what she was. "Told you. To get out." "You're bleeding on the floor I just mopped yesterday," Cora snapped. Her voice was shaking, cracking under the panic, but she forced the anger out to cover the fear. "Where is everyone? Where are your men?" "Dead," he murmured. The word slipped out of his mouth casually, like he was discussing the weather. "Or bought. Doesn't matter." He closed his eyes again. His skin was freezing. Cora shoved her hands under his shoulders. "Get up. I'm not letting you die in the hallway. It's too much paperwork for the temp agency." Leon let out a breath that might have been a laugh, but it ended in a wet cough. He forced his eyes open, finding her face. He didn't argue this time. He gritted his teeth, the muscles in his jaw ticking, and shifted his weight. Cora hauled him up. The sheer weight of him almost dragged her down with him. He was pure, dense muscle, entirely dead weight. She jammed her shoulder under his armpit, wrapping her arm around his waist. Her hand sank into the soaking wet fabric of his shirt. Her palm was instantly slick with his blood. She swallowed down the bile rising in her throat. "Kitchen," she gasped, struggling to keep them both upright. "The kitchen island." It took them 10 minutes to walk 50 feet. Every time Leon stumbled, Cora's knees buckled, her spine screaming in protest. The silence in the house was no longer predatory. It was a tomb. The realization settled over her like a suffocating blanket. There were no guards. No one was coming to help them. No one was coming to finish the job, either. Yet. They made it to the kitchen. Cora practically shoved him onto the nearest stool. He slumped forward, resting his forehead on the cold stainless steel of the counter. "Don't pass out," Cora ordered. She didn't wait for a response. She sprinted to the pantry. She had seen the massive first aid kit on the top shelf on her first day. She dragged a step stool over, yanked the heavy red plastic box down, and grabbed a stack of clean dish towels. When she ran back, Leon hadn't moved. His breathing was shallower. "Sit up," she demanded, dropping the supplies on the counter. He didn't move. Cora grabbed his shoulder and hauled him back. His head lolled slightly. She didn't ask for permission. She grabbed the hem of his ruined white shirt and ripped it upward. The buttons popped, pinging off the marble floor. She sucked in a sharp breath. His torso was a map of old violence, scars layered over scars. But the new violence was on his lower left side, just above the hip bone, a jagged, deep laceration. It wasn't a bullet hole. It looked like a knife wound, a bad one. It was pulsing a sluggish, terrifying dark red. "I need to put pressure on it," Cora said. She didn't know if he could hear her. She bundled a thick dish towel, pressed it directly against the gaping wound, and leaned her entire body weight into her hands. Leon roared. It was an animal sound, guttural and violent. His eyes snapped open, blazing with sudden, blind aggression. His hand shot out, his blood-slick fingers wrapping around Cora's throat. The grip was steel. He didn't squeeze, but the threat was absolute. He pinned her in place, his chest heaving, his eyes wild and unfocused as he stared at her. Cora froze. She didn't drop her hands from the towel. She didn't fight his grip. She just looked down at him, her own breathing shallow, feeling the erratic, frantic pulse of his thumb against her carotid artery. "It's just me," she whispered. Her voice was steady, even though her knees were trembling. "It's just Cora. I'm holding the towel." Leon blinked. The feral glaze in his eyes fractured. He looked at her face, down to her hands buried in the bloody towel, and then back to her eyes. He realized where his hand was. Slowly his fingers uncurled from her neck. He dropped his hand, letting it hang limply at his side. "Sorry," he exhaled. The word sounded foreign in his mouth. "Keep breathing," Cora said, her voice dropping back to that exhausted, flat tone. She pressed harder. They stayed like that for what felt like hours. The only sounds in the massive kitchen were the hum of the refrigerator, the drumming of the rain against the glass, and Leon's ragged breathing. Cora's arms burned. Her back ached with a familiar, deep-seated throb. Her cheap uniform was ruined, soaked through with his blood. She watched his face as the bleeding finally began to slow. He was staring at her, not looking through her, not analyzing her like a threat. Just staring. "Why didn't you run?" he asked quietly. His voice was a rasp. "My bag is in the locker room," Cora replied instantly. "I'm not leaving without my money." Leon closed his eyes. A genuine, tired smile cracked the hard lines of his face. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. It made him look painfully human. "You're a terrible liar, Cora. And you're bleeding on my clean floor. Keep your mouth shut and hold this towel." She grabbed his hand and pressed it over the bundled cloth, replacing her own. She stepped back. Her hands were dyed crimson, the blood drying tight and itchy against her skin. She walked over to the industrial sink and turned on the hot water. She watched the red swirl down the drain, just like the dirty mop water. She felt his eyes on her back the entire time. 3 days passed. The dampness lingered in the drywall. Cora had scrubbed the blood from the grout using a toothbrush and pure bleach. Other men had arrived, sweeping the grounds, stepping silently around her cart. It was Tuesday, East Wing duty. Cora was vacuuming the Persian rug when a hand hit the power button. The roar died. She gripped the plastic handle, closing her eyes before turning. Leon stood there, wearing a dark cashmere sweater. He moved stiffly, but the terrifying authority had returned. He held out a crisp manila folder. "I told you to take the week off," he said. "I don't do charity," Cora replied flatly. "Neither do I. I pay debts." Cora stared at the heavy paper. "What is that?" "Your landlord threatened to evict you," Leon said smoothly. "He no longer owns your building. I bought it. The deed is in your name." The silence was absolute, broken only by the erratic ticking of Cora's watch. She didn't feel relief. She felt sudden, violent nausea. "No," Leon frowned. "You saved my life. I solved your problem. You bought me." Cora's voice cracked, her flat demeanor shattering. Rage burned away the fear. "You think I don't know how this works? You put people on leashes. A building is an expensive leash." "You had $30 to your name," he whispered lethally. "And it was my $30, Cora yelled, tears of frustration burning her throat. "I kept you from bleeding out so I wouldn't have to step over a corpse. I am not owned by you." She snatched the folder, ripped the thick paper in half, and dropped the pieces onto the rug. "I quit." She turned away, expecting a bullet. "Cora," the plea stopped her. Leon ran a hand through his dark hair. 12 women ran, but you stepped over my blood to do your job. In my world, everything is leverage. I tried to buy your safety because I didn't know how else to make you stay. Don't quit." Cora looked at the hand that pulled triggers. "I pay my own rent, and I charge double for hazard pay." A faint, genuine smile touched his mouth. "Done." Cora nodded. She stepped past his tall frame and walked back over to her cleaning cart. She pressed the ancient vacuum switch. The sudden, deafening mechanical roar completely shattered the heavy house's unnatural silence. The shadows of the East Wing hold more secrets, and Cora's survival is just beginning. If you felt the heavy tension in this raw, unforgiving story, please don't let it end here. Hit the like button to support more grounded, gritty storytelling. Share this video with someone who craves dark, realistic romance that doesn't shy away from the ugly truth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. The basement door is still locked.